welcome to Run It Back on the Raptors Republic Network. I'm your host, Zulfi, joined by Kyle Ramnarayan, as always, here to recap another slate of Raptors basketball. And a lot has happened since we last spoke. The Raptors went into the All-Star break, came out of it, and there were a couple of games in the midst of it all. So with that being said, let's run it back. All right, it's been 2 weeks, but not too many ball games since we last spoke. So let's just get right into it. Prior to the All-Star break, we had the Raptors hosting Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs, and Wemby lived up to his alien-like billing, finishing with a ridiculous stat line of 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 10 blocks, while dominating the Raptors 122-99. The loss was especially hard on Scottie Barnes, who had a quiet night with 7 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, and 5 turnovers, but he got so frustrated that he left the bench early, and it caused a bit of a stir with the fan base. We'll talk about that in a bit, but thankfully, the first-time All-Star did dispel most of the noise in their final game before the break when they took on Pascal Siakam and the Indiana Pacers. It was a spirited back-and-forth contest. Barnes looked much more engaged and active as he finished with 29 points, 12 rebounds, and 8 assists. And the Raptors had an opportunity to send the game to overtime on the final shot, but RJ Barrett had a lefty attempt that was no good. Some good defense by Indiana. So it was unfortunate to lose, but it was nice to see Scottie go right up to RJ after, give him a pat of encouragement, because that is leadership. Now to All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis. Scottie might have been the meme king of the break with his slip-ups in the skills contest, while also sneakily doing pretty well in the event. Or there was his ridiculous backwards half-court shot that went way wide. It was clear Scottie was having a lot of fun, and I won't break down the full All-Star game as it was essentially a layup line on steroids, but Barnes did look great with 16 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists with a couple highlights in 18 minutes of action as the East won 211-186. Goddamn. Now we talk post-All-Star. In the Raptors' first game back when they took on the spiraling Brooklyn Nets, and they dominated all aspects of the game. Defense was great, forcing 19 turnovers. Offense was efficient, shooting over 45% from the field and distance. And the Raptors handily won 121-93. Gary Trent Jr. led the way with 25 points, while Emmanuel quickly added in 24, 6, and 3 as they snapped a 3-game losing skid. Now the final game to recap is the most recent, a road contest against the Atlanta Hawks. There was a lot of action in this one. The Raptors started very strong, largely thanks to IQ, who was red hot in the first half. He scored 18 points while shooting 67% from downtown, just using his bigs as much as possible to free up and chuck it. He ended up finishing with 24 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists while hitting 6 triples. Now the Raptors earned themselves a 16-point lead, and another major contributor was Grady Dick. He was letting it fly and looking confident as the rookie finished with 18 points off the bench on 8 of 13 shooting, hitting step backs, hitting threes, and just about everything in between. But things got interesting after a wild ejection for Hawks head coach Quinn Snyder for storming on the court after a non-call. Atlanta woke up and started crashing the glass and crashing it hard, and the Raptors had little answers for them. Toronto allowed 20 offensive rebounds, which led to 29 second chance points, and the game was pretty close the rest of the way. But thankfully, they were able to execute down the stretch, hitting some big shots and locking up the Hawks backcourt duo of Young, who finished with just 11 points, and Murray in the clutch, who ended up having a turnover at the end that basically saved the game for the Raptors. Now, Gary Trent Jr. hit a clutch triple late, followed by Captain Canada Kelly Olynyk drilling an insane Dirk-like fadeaway off glass, and then also a nice layup through traffic. The Raptors were able to hold on 123-121 for the victory. To recap all that, Toronto went 2-2 over their last 4 games and are now 21-36, still sitting in 12th place in the Eastern Conference, but creeping up on the competition, which brings me to my first question, Kyle. Since the Raptors beat the 11th-seeded Nets and 10th-seeded Hawks, the buzz for a play-in spot has become a bit louder, and let me break it down for you. Toronto is now 3.5 games back of the Hawks for the final play-in spot, and Darko Rakovic, coming out of the All-Star break, basically said that they want to be as competitive as possible, chase the play-in spot, chase the playoffs, which seems to be true so far since they've won back-to-back games. And now you add the wrinkle that Trae Young is going to miss at least 4 weeks because he has a torn ligament in his finger that he needed surgery for. So with saying all that, it seems like the Raptors are actually trying to make this possible. It's not so far-fetched anymore. But I want to know, where do you fall on this? Do you think this happens? Do you think it's smart for the Raptors to even be pursuing this play-in spot? Where do you fall?
Listen, I'm probably gonna get slammed for this by Raptors fans, but I don't think they should be making the plans. I'm kind of a guy just like, if I know where the team is heading and I know what our direction is to kind of retool and rebuild, I don't think they should make the play in because I want to try and get as high draft pick as possible and keep that rebuilding going. And it's like if I know they're making the play in, I know they're not going to make a deep playoff run. So it's kind of just delaying the inevitable of getting bounced out the playoffs. So why do that instead of just going for an actual like high pick in the draft, keeping your pick? That's where I stand. It's kind of a pessimistic view. Like I'm always excited for the future, but when it comes to something like this, like yes, I know we want to be competitive, but it's like we want to be competitive for a reason, not just be competitive and just get bounced off because we're not going to win the chip all of a sudden unless it's some miracle season. But for this, logically, I want us to kind of keep retooling, rebuilding, experiment with the lineup, experiment with the younger players. Like you can be competitive in the regular season, and then later on down the line, we can get back into the playoffs. I don't know. How are you feeling about this?
I'm glad you said that because this might be our first debate on this show. Because look, I think I fall on the opposite side of this for a couple of reasons, and the main one is that this version of this team is so young, so inexperienced, especially together, and they are just not nearly as battle tested. Like a couple of seasons ago, Masai Ujiri basically said, "Playing for what?" Essentially saying that why would he care about pushing for a playing spot when they were in Tampa, instead tanking and drafting Scottie Barnes, which was the right choice at the time, to be fair to your point. But that team was a lot more veteran savvy, a lot more experience, and they had higher aspirations, quite honestly. They just had a really bad season because of the Tampa tank and everything that was going on there. But this version has very little playoff experience, has barely done anything together. And I think we can all agree that they have fast-tracked a lot of this rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it, with some of these guys, with Scottie Barnes ascending the way he is, getting an Emmanuel quickly and RJ Barrett to pair with him, and then if Grady Dick can even keep going with the way that he's going right now. They're fast tracking a lot of this process. Scottie's extension is coming up. They probably don't want to be losing a whole lot in the next couple of years. So with that, like they're trying to kind of get them that experience now. I use the example of like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and OKC. Bringing in Chris Paul and taking them into the playoffs in the bubble wasn't really going to do much for them. They knew they weren't winning a championship, but getting SGA that experience was really important. Getting this very young team that postseason experience was really important for the coaching staff, for their players like Lou Dort as well. So I think there is value to it. And this team is kind of in a position, we'll talk about it in a bit, where like trying to control the lottery odds is a really difficult thing. So for me, I'm just like, get that experience, try to get your team better and live with the results is kind of where I'm at with this. And I think this team needs a bit of that as well. So that's why I push back a little bit and I kind of like the idea. And then you add in the fact that the Raptors are really in the mix to do something here. I think it makes sense. And the schedule isn't going to be easy because they have a lot of games coming up against winning teams. But this is kind of a test for them. But I want to jump off of that because, again, we're both on opposite sides of this, and I think I know where you're going to fall on this. But there's the conversation of the play-in and making it and all that obviously impacts the draft. There is Team Keep, who wants to keep this draft pick, like you seem to be mentioning, and then there's Team Conveying the draft pick that kind of wants to push it off. What kind of wants to give it to San Antonio now and get it off the books and not worry about it, give them the top 6 protected pick like they're owed. So why are you on the side of like this draft pick needs to be made this year? We want to have this draft pick, get it high as possible versus just trying next year, which is probably a stronger draft class.
I think, like, honestly, the only reason why I would be like, don't keep this draft pick is because of how weak this draft class is. And like, that's no disrespect to anyone in this draft class. But for me, it's just like, it goes along with the rebuilding and retooling of the franchise. You know, we're entering a new era. There are like good players that are coming up in this draft that the Raptors could use, some forwards and some bigs potentially. And if we do land a top 3 pick, there is another, I'm blanking on his name right now, but there's another Frenchman in this draft who is just as tall as Wemby. It could be good for the team too as well. You know, so for me, keeping the pick, it just goes along with the direction. And it's like, hey, like even if we were to not like say don't make the plans, you still get a top 6 pick. That's great for this team. Help build up the young core. For me, at least, I think you should try it because, you know, we've seen what we're doing this season just to be randomly competitive at the end of the season. I know the only thing is like, yeah, they'll get that play-in experience, they'll get a little bit of playoff experience, but for me, just kind of like build the foundations and then next year maybe make a try for the play-in and then gradually keep building and building it. Like, again, I feel like you're on the side of conveying the pick though.
Yeah, so the pick part of it is really interesting to me, and like I want to break it down a little bit. So you obviously want to keep the pick and make this pick, and the person you were talking about is Alex Sarr, Frenchman, really good, really highly touted prospect, just like Wemby was. The Raptors currently have about a 30% chance, 32% if we want to be more specific, of getting a top 4 pick, where they are currently. but they also have a near 54% chance of landing in the 7th or 8th spot. So they have a significantly higher chance of basically relaying the pick where they are right now. So essentially, you have to decide if you want to keep the pick. They can't just keep doing what they're doing because the teams below them suck. The Pistons, the Wizards, the Trailblazers, even the Grizzlies, who have been kind of plucky at times, they are just so injury riddled that they're not going to be doing all that well, that we don't know what's going to happen with those teams. They're probably going to continue losing a lot of games. So if the Raptors want to kind of really guarantee that one of those top 3 picks, which is probably going to be some of the actual real talent in this draft, they have to tank hard. And that is something that I don't know this franchise is just willing to do. They did it again in the Tampa season, but the circumstances of that were so different. So I think like just the way the franchise is talking, it just makes more sense to live with the results and kind of see what happens, because there's also the fact that like Bobby Webster mentioned it, like we're just going to play games. We're going to try to be competitive and see what happens. If we give up the pick, if we keep the pick, whatever, it's great. Darko Rajakovic seems to be saying the same thing. So I think I'm just falling in the side of aligning with what they're saying and what I'm kind of hearing out here. And the other side of it too is like, yes, you give up this top pick, and I understand like the Raptors don't come across such high picks all that often. The last time they did, they had Scottie Barnes. That's great. But their history with top picks isn't also like league or franchise changing either. Like the last couple of top picks they had, like Jakob Poeltl, Jonas Valanciunas, and DeMar DeRozan, they traded those guys to get Kawhi Leonard. The foundation of their team outside of that were guys they drafted later in Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Norman Powell, Fred VanVleet. Kyle Lowry wasn't like a super high draft pick either, as far as I remember, even though they did trade for him. So like they can build those foundations in other ways as well, is what I see. And they have that pick from Indiana, and that's currently 17th right now. That is possibly a talented player. There's no way to say like it's impossible for them to draft somebody that can be like a contributing player at 17. And there is some kind of possibility in some world where Indiana stumbles towards the end of the season and maybe that pick ends up being a lottery pick. Who knows? So I think that 17th pick is still there. They still have that second round pick, which is probably going to be the first pick of the second round with the way Detroit Pistons record is. So I think it's like it shouldn't be all or nothing with this 6th overall pick potentially, and just kind of seeing it at that. I think they have other options, so I'm kind of on the side with that. But that's why I think like this conversation is going to be interesting, because every single game, they have 25 games left. Every loss, every win is going to shift the odds one way or another, and it's going to have people spiraling. So the conversation is interesting. So I guess I want to know from people in the comments, let us know. Are you team keep? Are you team convey? Do you want this pick off the books now, just not have to worry about it? Or do you want to try swinging for the fences, trying to tank, make a nice big draft pick and see what happens with it? Let us know in the comments what you think. But I think going off that, the last thing I want to touch on, Kyle, is that the Raptors, like I said, have about 25 games left. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what's the biggest thing you want to see out of this team? Is it just like chemistry building? Is it rotational thing, something on the court? Is it just basic, just general development? There's a lot of storylines to keep an eye on throughout this last stretch of games. What do you want to see from this team?
Well, first, I want to see that pizza party. These boys are starving, bro. We're almost about to go a whole season. And we might have to defeat Siakam tonight for the pizza party. But, aside from that, I want to see Grady to get inserted to the starting lineup. Like, he's been really good for this team lately. Like in that Hawks game, finding his spot on the wing for that mid-range jumper. He's been cutting back door, playing the passing lanes, hitting his shots, and his confidence is growing. So for me, I tweeted that out too. Like just seeing his progression from the start of the season to go into that P90X, the G League, and then come into the Raptors now, and he's hitting his shots more and more reliable, and he's becoming more of a reliable scorer for this team. So I want to see what he can get done with the starters in a few different games, few different scenarios, like against the Golden State Warriors or against the Pacers or against whatever teams, because he might do good, he might do bad. But for me, like the way he's been progressing, and we don't know the future of Gary Trent Jr. with this team. So I think putting Grady into the starting lineup, it's like what's the worst thing that can happen? Like he goes off, or we know what we already know, that he needs to grow a little bit more. But I kind of want to shift focus here a little bit too, and I know you mentioned it at the beginning of your recap. Scottie Barnes, that San Antonio Spurs game. We didn't get to recap that, but the entire fan base came down on him after either the body language he was showing during the game, the effort the team was showing, and then storming off at the end of the game. Do you think the criticism was deserved, or do you think this fan base needs to relax on Scottie a little bit?
I'm glad you brought it back. That I kind of forgot to address that, and I want to clarify. It wasn't the entire fan base. It was the entire Twitter fan base.
Yes.
And specifically the entire Twitter Spaces fan base. You already know what I think about Twitter Spaces. So I'm coming for them again. The entire Twitter Spaces fan base and their 10-hour rant or whatever that they had, they were on Scottie Barnes the most. So I think that is important to address. But on a more serious note, like, I think being held accountable for that is important, and that was justified. I think kind of going to the points of saying that, like, he can't handle this, he is just not ready for it, he's not meant for this, is rather, and he's just kind of like not going to be able to kind of deal with the pressure. I think that's going a step too far. But being held accountable for that is important. It's not something you want to see, not from your leader, especially because Scottie Barnes has kind of habitually shown some of these like signs of letting frustration, emotions get the better of him, arguing with refs, not getting back on defense, thumping his shoulder, stuff like that. And I think for me, that's actually one of the more interesting things I want to see down the stretch of the season, because since the All-Star break and even before that Pacers game, he's shown a lot more energy, being a lot more motivated, he's a lot more active, and he's out there, but they've also been playing better. They've had some really good games in stretch of basketball, but a really young team is going to be inconsistent. So what happens the next time the Raptors go on a 3-game losing streak or have a stretch of frustrating basketball, which Scottie Barnes is inevitably going to be a part of? They're going to lose more frustrating games. Is he going to kind of rise above and learn to be the leader in those situations, or is he going to let the frustrations get to him like he has in the past? That's going to be important for me to see down the stretch. In terms of the response and backlash, I think it was unfortunately added to the fact with Scottie Barnes' weird response after the next day of practice. When Darko said they had a conversation, he said they kind of didn't, but they did talk about it. So that made it a bit more like newsy than it had to be. But I didn't think it was that big of a deal. He was obviously frustrated, but he's so young. It's a 22-year-old that you're asking to be the face of a rebuilding franchise that's going through it. He's trying to figure out his own like career as well while dealing with all of that. And so it's obviously very hard. But on the other side of the coin, I do understand people wanting to kind of hold him accountable and see that, because, again, the Raptors are about to hand him a rookie scale max extension. So when you give a guy that kind of money, you expect him to kind of live up to those expectations, and it's part of the job. So I understand both sides of the coin, but I think where I generally fall is the fact that he's figuring it out. It's going to take time. And I want to use this last stretch of games to really see him develop those skills, those leadership abilities. Again, against the Pacers, RJ Barrett took that last shot. That was maybe a little questionable, but it was fine. He lived with the results, and Scottie immediately went up to RJ and encouraged him. Stuff like that. Being active, being a communicator, which we know that Scottie can be, is going to be really important. And do we see that consistently throughout this final stretch of the game is going to be a really big thing for me. So I think it's not as big as people are making it, but there is something to take from it. That's for sure.
You know, for me, like, as soon as I went on Twitter after the game, these guys were calling for his head. And this is what I got to say to all these quote-unquote fans out here. You know, okay, so I was hearing Scottie's taking the VC way out, like the Vince Carter way out.
Oh, gosh.
This is not our future. Like, you guys need to chill, bro. Like, Scottie is only, what, 22, 23? He's now figuring his way out figuring his way around being the face of a franchise when the other franchise player left in the same, or got traded in the same year. So we have to chill on this guy. Not after one bad game. Like, we got to stop turning on him. Again, I was on the side that what he did that game wasn't acceptable, and Darko should have sat down and been like, yo, this isn't cool. You are in front of everybody. Everyone has eyes on you. They're going to watch what you do. You need to see how you act on the court and off the court. It gets noticed. That's where some discipline should have happened. But other than that, I'm not going to come down on him and be like, he needs to get traded. He's not the face of this team, whatever. We have to be patient and build with Scottie and help reinforce him too as well. Like, just seeing all this, it's not going to help him like Toronto even more, seeing fans turn on him. You need to support him as a player, as someone that's coming up in Toronto. Like, he loves the city more than anything else. So be supportive. This is what I'm saying. Twitter Spaces, be supportive. The other thing you guys are doing is staying in Twitter Space in 8 hours. What was it, 16-hour Twitter Spaces?
Oh my god.
The other day, that was insane. Instead of doing that, how about we just support our players? That's all I gotta say on it. I just didn't like the reaction Scottie was getting after that game. I thought, yes, Darko should have disciplined him a little bit, but other than that, the whole canceling of Scottie Barnes after the game, I didn't like it.
Yeah, again, the internet is a wild, wild west of a place, but that's just kind of what we've gotten used to. That's what Twitter is. That's what people is. People are allowed to sound off and give their opinions. But let us know what you think. Do you think that the reaction was too far? Do you think it was just? And I was curious to see if the conversation still is happening the rest of the season, if it shows back up these frustrations or not. But the last thing I wanted to quickly touch on, Kyle, with you, is a fun one. The Raptors over under. I know we talk about betting a little bit on this show at the end, and you'll get to betting ahead. But before we do, I wanted to give a little sneak preview with there's a line for win total this season. It's set at 36.5. That's their lowest since, I believe, 2013, outside of the shortened post-pandemic season. And they've
Mhm.
been able to hit the over in 10 of their last 12 seasons, doing it 8 in a row at one point. But in the last 4, they've only done it twice. And
Mhm.
one was during, again, like the weird like middle of the pandemic season. They were able to hit the over, but it technically didn't count. So I want to know, do you think with 25 games left, they're at 21 wins, can they get to 37? They need 60 more wins out of 25.
Bro, I'm gonna like again. I promise I'm not a hater, but I'm gonna say no. I don't think they get to 37. Like just even this week alone, I think like I'm gonna mention this in betting ahead, but I think they lose to the Mavericks and the Warriors. So I I don't think so, unfortunately. But you know, you're lucky to prove me wrong. You know, get that pizza party, get multiple pizza parties. Who know, feed the whole team. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I don't think they can pull it out. I don't think they get the over on this.
Man,
What are you
say it
saying?
with some chest. The math is on your side.
like
If you're
like
saying it, you're
like
not being a
like
hater. You're just following the
like
math.
I promise I don't hate this team. I promise. I love this team, but for me, I don't think they're gonna get 37 wins. That's just me. I don't know what anybody else is saying. What are you saying?
Yeah, look, like I said, the math isn't on their side, and I don't think you're a hater for saying that. They need 16 wins out of 25, and
Mm,
like I mentioned before, 18 of those games are against teams with a 500 record or better, and I think that is going to be really, really difficult. But this team is all about culture setting and all about working towards like getting back to their roots. And during that DeMar DeRozan, Kyle Lowry era, and the We the North Raptors, part of their culture was just constantly exceeding expectations, hitting their over. So I kind of want to like believe a little bit on that side of it. Like asking them to win 16 of 25 is a lot, and it's probably not going to happen. But I'll be a little optimistic and say that I think there is a good chance they can do it. And if they do, it can be an amazing catalyst for them going into next season. So let's see them at least try. Again, I'm on the side where like push for the play and be competitive, see what happens. But I think that pretty much wraps it up for our conversation, recapping all this action. We're gonna move on to the power rankings now to talk a bit more about specific players.
All right, so this week for the power rankings, everything's been kind of all over the place. So guys going back to the 905, a lot of people getting DNPs. So this is what I put together for this week. Number 1, Scottie Barnes. 2, RJ Barrett. 3, Emmanuel Quickly. 4, Jakob Poeltl. 5, Gary Trent Jr. 6, Grady Dick. 7, Bruce Brown. 8, Kelly Olynyk. 9, Ochai Agbaji. 10, Chris Boucher. 11, Jordan Nwora. 12, Shante Porter. 13, DJ Carton. 14, Jalen McDaniels. And 15, Garrett Temple. All right, Zulfi, what did you notice or anything you just want to comment on?
Kyle, I'm ready to call you out.
Yeah.
We talk about this list being fluid,
Like,
and it is week to week. And if this
yeah.
is based on this last week of action, put more respect on Emmanuel Point God Quickly's name. I think he should be higher up, if not number one on this list. Like you can tell me why in a second. Scottie Barnes is still number one, but like Quickly, man, he is starting to figure this out. I'm obviously a little biased. I wrote about it for Raptors Republic. Go check out that article if you haven't already. I put in a lot of work into that. That he is starting to realize what a point guard in today's NBA is, and these past 2 games have shown that. I don't know what the heck Darko and his coaching staff has said to him to finally start being aggressive, but he is going score first, shoot first, and that is setting up a lot of his actions and sequences as a playmaker. You see how he just runs around screens and gets so many open threes, navigating, and then once he kind of got back to being the Quickly that keeps alive dribble instead of having to kind of feed off others off ball to get his looks inside, his efficiency is getting better from inside the arc as well. So I think Quickly is starting to figure out this whole point guard thing. Back-to-back games with 24 points. His last game, he had 7 rebounds, 5 assists. That final assist to Scottie Barnes, where he kind of pump faked DeJounte, went inside, drew a double, and then kicked it off. That's exactly how point guard Quickly should operate and should work. And I think he's starting to figure it out. At least for this week, he's looked really good at that point guard role. So I think he deserves a bit more respect. If we're going week to week, he should be number 1 in my books. But tell me why you got Scottie up there.
For me, like I would like there's two kind of like contentions on this list that I want to kind of move around. That was Emmanuel Quickly, and the other one was either should I put Kelly Olynyk higher than Bruce Brown. But for Emmanuel Quickly, at least
yes, you should. We'll get back to that.
I was really thinking about that, and I think I still actually might just change that even in the video. But it's for me, I think I would put him if I had to higher than RJ Barrett, but not yet Scottie Barnes, because I like how Scottie has bounced back after that Spurs game. I think like within these last 2 weeks, he's demonstrated, you know, I can come back from tough criticism, I can come back from tough losses, and he's been really good from the team. RJ Barrett, I think maybe I wouldn't be mad if we did put Emmanuel Quickly over him, because again, he was dealing with a little bit of health issues, and then he had one game where I think he scored like 7 points. And Emmanuel Quickly, he's been figuring it out. You know, this is my point guard of the Raptors' future. I don't know how people feel about it, but yeah, I'm not gonna argue with you. I'm not gonna get mad at you for saying that he should be higher up on this list. Like if anything, I would put him 2, but for me, I would keep Scottie at number 1 still.
Yeah, like again, in fairness, Scottie has looked really, really impressive too. His numbers have been great. He's had a couple double doubles. He's been doing a bit of everything like he does, and I think he's starting to figure out his role as well. It's interesting because like these are basically your two ball handlers of the future, at least with the way they're going now. They don't have a traditional backup point guard, so like Scottie and Quickly have been splitting time, and I kind of want to ask you based off of that this idea of like they're not playing together as much. They start games together and they usually end games together, but those middle stretches, it's a lot of like splitting time. So Scottie plus 4 bench guys, and Manny Quickly plus 4 bench guys, and they're kind of the point guards going back and forth. And I think there's a lot to be gained from that. People have mentioned it online too when I brought it up that like it's their best way to develop them as decision makers and guys who can like work on their ball skills. But there's also the idea that like this is your point guard of the future with your franchise cornerstone, and they need to learn to play together, play sequences together, actions together, either through pick and roll or whatnot, especially because like Scottie Barnes, they're very good, big athletic wing that can be a great roller off the pick and roll, but then Emmanuel Quickly can also be a good screener, an option to pop off and then work off Scottie because he's such a good passer. So there's so much potential there. But right now, I've looked at the film too. These guys, when they're passing to each other, it is very, very often just standstill positions. Like Scottie moves to the corner, Quickly passes it to him, and vice versa. They're not really working together in actions. And so far, it hasn't really been to their detriment because they're trying to figure everything else out. But I think there needs to be at least a bit more emphasis put on that so they can build chemistry together. But what do you think about that dynamic?
I think for now, at least, like I don't mind kind of splitting it, but I know like if we're saying that we want this team to get competitive and go into the play-ins, we know that in the playoffs, this game slows down a lot. The tempo slows down.
Tighten up
Exactly. So we need to. I want to see that my point guard playing with my face of the franchise for the most part too. I think right now what the Raptors are lacking to is someone to kind of lead this bench unit off the bench. You know, we need a proper 6-man, and I think we tried it with maybe Gary Trent earlier when he was coming off the bench a little bit, but it didn't succeed as much. So maybe it could be that guy could be Bruce Brown going forward if he does want to stay with the team, or whoever they need to. But I think right now it's okay for this season, but going forward into future seasons, especially if you want to be competitive and play in the playoffs, we need the two best players on the team playing together and finding a way to make it work and not getting as stagnant in that half court offense. Either play to Scottie's strengths, either pass it to him when he's got the ball posting up, or run the pick and rolls with Quickly, you know, the pick and pop. Scottie got that 3-point. Any way to kind of play to these guys' skills and mesh together. I feel like just because honestly it's only their first year, they're still figuring it out. The chemistry will get there and will develop, and they'll start figuring out each other's tendencies more and more. But right now, I don't kind of mind the splitting because you need someone to help that bench. You need someone to help guide them, and getting one of the stars of the team with those guys will kind of help them along. But again, going forward, I think you gotta play them together.
Yeah, again, I'm with you. And you mentioned like figuring out like a 6-man player and type role. And I think, again, they tried that with Dennis Schroeder. They tried that with Gary Trent Jr., having their 6-man be this guy who can facilitate and be the leader of the bench unit. But I think that approach may not work in today's NBA as much. We've seen a lot of the most successful 6-man in today's games are just that spark plug scorer. Hell, not even today's NBA. Look at the guys in the past. Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, guys who just come off the bench and score a lot and can do it efficiently. Which is why I think for this closing stretch, a guy I want to talk about is Grady Dick. And the reason why is because he's basically been that 6-man. I looked at it, and in the last 15 games, not only has he been lights out shooting since he returned to the team after that P90X stint on January 17th, he's been shooting lights out 45% from the field, 45% from 3, I believe, and even better from the field, to be honest. And the crazy part is he's played the 6th most minutes on this team in that stretch. He's basically been their 6-man. He's been the first guy off the bench most often, if not with Kelly Olynyk, and he's building a lot of chemistry with the second unit. And if he can be that spark plug scorer, and we already know he's starting to learn to do a bit of everything else in terms of passing and defense, I think at least for this closing stretch, he can fit into that 6-man role. I know you want to see him start, and I think it would be interesting to see him start a bit as well. But I think Darko's made it very clear that he wants to build a cohesive bench unit. There's a reason why when RJ Barrett was out, they put Jordan Nwora in there instead of upgrading Grady Dick to a starter and moving things along. He wants to have the second unit building chemistry. And to Darko's credit, it paid off against the Hawks. Their bench unit looked fantastic. They scored 54 points. And Ochai Agbaji, Kelly Olynyk, and Grady Dick had insane chemistry with each other. And then with Scottie Barnes out there, they looked really good. So I think there's something to be said about Darko really finding a bit of success with that bench unit. But I think in terms of a 6-man and a person that can fit that role, at least for this closing stretch, I really do think Grady Dick can do it because he has been doing it a bit so far. But what do you think?
You know, I wouldn't mind that, honestly. Like, I do want to see Grady start just to see the experiment-wise of how he would fit in with the starters, if he'd do better or worse. But honestly, coming off the bench, too, he's been great. Like, as long as his confidence progresses and his game progresses, I wouldn't mind seeing him come off the bench too. He could be a really, if you accept that role off the bench and truly embrace it, you could be something great. You can win six mans of the years. You can provide that spark off the bench. It's something that a lot of people kind of I feel like overlook a lot of times because they don't want to come off the bench. But if Grady kind of embraces that, I can see it working out for him long term, really good. And that secures you not only a future on the Raptors, it can secure you futures on other teams. People need that six-man position, and if Grady is that guy to kind of develop his defense, put on a little more weight, get stronger, he could be that key off the bench that the Raptors do need going forward too. Because again, in the playoffs, when the game slows down, your bench has to come in and provide. And if you have a guy like Grady Dick that can torch other players' bench units as well, and give the minutes to Scottie and them when they're resting, it could be great for this team long term. So I wouldn't be too against it as long as he keeps developing the way he is.
I said on the Raptors or on other teams. My brother, he is a rookie. Why are you
Yo,
already sending him away? What are you doing?
Not trading him. I mean, just like getting that money, like getting his money. Because I want to see the guy get his bag. Not hopefully not trading him, but like if he provides value and the Raptors are like, yo, like for some reason they don't want to keep him, give the guy his bag, bro. He's that six man.
Six mans are valuable. You're right. Like like more so you just know six mans are very valuable. They're really important to a lot of teams. Again, being that steadying force scoring wise, and again building chemistry with that second unit, I think will be interesting. And I think if there's a couple other guys you want to mention, feel free, and then we can talk about it. But another player that I thought that is worth talking about is Chris Boucher, because I don't really understand the situation with what's going on with him. They sent John Day Porter back down to the 905. So they're like main bigs are obviously Kelly Olynyk and then Jakob Poeltl, who's starting. But outside of that, they don't really have much size other than Chris Boucher. And you saw it against the Pacers. This guy stays ready. He comes in, provides an insane spark, looks good, but then he's back out of the rotation post All-Star break. And I said this before, and I was wrong, and I'll admit that he's an upcoming free agent. He has one more year after this. He's making around 11 million this year, and then he's making around 10 next year. So I think that isn't really as much of a problem anymore, where they're like, oh, he's going to be gone, because he still has one more year. And if you're looking to flip him, hey, how about increasing his trade value by playing him? Because when he's out there, he is increasing his value. And I think the most important thing with Chris Boucher is the fact that he shows these young guys what it means to really give an effort. Whenever he's out there, he is trying like a maniac, whether it's crashing the glass, whether it's getting inside and being active on defense and offense. It's just that effort and energy is always there, and that's really important for these young guys to see from a vet. So I think that's an important part of this too. It's obviously hard because there's so many guys they want to figure out in this rotation where they're going to fit. Where's Ochai going to play? Where's Jordan Ward going to fit in this if he's even going to play? You still have Bruce Brown there as well. So I know it's difficult, but he's a guy who's been a steadying presence on this team. And if you are looking to flip him, I think having these 25 games going into the offseason to kind of really increase that value will be important. So I kind of want to see him back there, but I'm curious what your thoughts have been on this whole Chris Boucher situation in the rotation.
I was gonna bring this up too if you didn't bring it up. Like, where has this guy been? He came into Indy. As soon as he checked into the Indiana game, it was like a bat out of hell. Like, bro, grabbing the hustle, grabbing the boards, cutting back door, scoring points. He was doing everything we wanted from him earlier in the season, and his energy was just infectious. He came into that game, I was like, this is great. He's playing like he's playing for a contract right now. And then after that, he was getting DNPs. He's getting no minutes. And I was like, why? I'm just confused. Why aren't we seeing more Chris Boucher? It's not like we have it's not like we're just running. We have too many bigs right now. And what's the harm in giving him more opportunities? Like, again, we're going into the final stretch of the season. What is the harm in seeing more Chris Boucher? Right now, he's doing everything we need him to do. And if he's playing with energy like this, give him a chance. Give him a chance.
I just think he's a proven commodity in this league, and I know that's less exciting, but there's also value in that, again, for your young guys. But like a guy like Bruce Brown, he's had stretches where he's looked really good. He's that Swiss Army knife, but he has other stretches where he just chucks up the most random shots going through traffic. He looks a little lifeless out there on defense as well. Obviously, part of that is him figuring it out. So, like, why not split these guys minutes? You don't need Bruce Brown to be that backup ball handler as much because you have Scottie Barnes in that role. And you also have Kelly Olynyk, who's a great passer and connector with the bench unit. So you can rein back on Bruce Brown's minutes, get Boucher some more time, and kind of switch things out, especially games where they need a bit more size. So I think that'll be interesting to see. Hopefully we see it, but I'm not sure. Darko obviously has a lot to figure out with this rotation, so I'm going to cut him a bit of slack. But I kind of want to see him bring back the vet into the rotation. But what about you? Is there any other players you wanted to talk about? about?
I was gonna talk about Bruce Brown. This is something like I don't know if I'm just falling for the shenanigans, but do you think Bruce Brown is gonna re-sign with this team? Because right now, I saw the interview he did with Lindsey Dunn this morning, and the yeehaws, bro.
Yeehaw.
And I see he's vibing with the team, but I don't know if this is like an Among Us imposter situation, and I'm just falling for it, and he's just gonna leave. But do you think he stays with the team, or he just heads somewhere else?
I think I'm in the camp of like a lot of people describe it as like a stopgap, where
Mhm.
it's kind of literally a stopgap solution right now, and kind of it's beneficial for both sides to make the most of the situation while they're together. But like
Mhm.
I think Bruce Brown being a good sport and being nice while
Yeah.
he's here isn't like an imposter thing.
Mhm.
I just think it's him being a really good guy.
Mhm.
And even if that's not the situation for him long term, which I don't think it honestly is, I think it's beneficial for both sides to look for a deal this offseason and kind of moving him, because it's a spot where, like, yes, Bruce Brown can fit in, but I've talked about this before. He adds the most value for a team that's a lot more ready to compete right now. He is a connector. He's a Swiss Army knife. But a lot of that is reliant upon the talent he's playing with. It's a lot easy, again, to be that kind of player when you're next to Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. And I said that. And obviously, it's not like a mind-blowing thing to say, but it's true. So him being around more talented rosters that are ready to compete right now is most valuable for him. And it's better for the Raptors because they can kind of get better value for him in that sense out of a competing team who wants to add that last piece. So I think it works for both sides to move off after the season. If he can teach some of the young guys, if he can show an Ochai Agbaji kind of how to be a better defender, be that Swiss Army knife that we think Ochai can kind of eventually turn into, I think there's value there. But I definitely don't see him staying long term. I'd be surprised if the Raptors chose to re-sign him, quite honestly. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. But I would say, in my opinion, it's very unlikely. It's a lot likely that they trade him this offseason, get some value, and kind of move on from there.
Yeah, I agree too. Honestly, like Bruce Brown, like he's been like great for this, and maybe he's had those games where we're kind of like, what are you doing on the court? But I see he's kind of just really embracing it. He's not being miserable at all, like like other people would have expected, you know. So just kind of embracing the Raptors and hopefully mentoring the young rookies. It's been great to see. And just last thing, bro, we need Jalen McDaniels to get some more minutes, bro. That's my guy right there.
Stop this! I don't want. You're turning into Twitter Spaces.
Bro.
Stop this! I don't want to hear that. I'm sorry. I love me some Jalen McDaniels. I think he's a nice enough dude. But that guy clearly is not showing anything.
Bro, I saw this guy's height and length. That is Kevin Durant, bro.
Stop. What are you talking? What?
I saw
Is that how you really want to end this segment with just the most nonsense you could talk? It's like Kevin Durant. What do you mean?
Bro, give him a chance, man. Give that guy.
Darko has given him plenty of chances. They had one good game against the Pistons. Against the Celtics. Ironically, he goes up against the Pistons the next game and then looks worse. I've never seen someone so consistently bad in garbage time minutes. You know how impressive that is in the worst way to be that bad in garbage time? Just like if you could go on like basketball, like NBA.com and look at like the advanced stats where they have like film for everything, just look at his turnovers. Just look at them. There's so many and they're just so remarkably insane. Like, bro, Jalen McDaniels, I hope nothing but the best for you. I hope you figure this out. But like, my goodness, he is not the guy who needs to be getting minutes in this rotation right now. I'll say that.
It hurt me putting this guy's name at 14 on this list, bro. I had to move his name down.
These Garrett Temple's a good bet. He could basically be a coach on any team here. This guy has him behind Jalen McDaniels. He can't do anything.
My guy, that's my guy J Mac, bro. Like we gotta.
Stop this. I don't want to hear. Okay, Jalen McDaniels. I hope you figure it out, but I am not super hopeful. But I'm gonna end it there before Kyle continues his love poem for Jalen McDaniels. But we're gonna move on to our next segment now.
Okay, now it's time for this week's betting ahead. So before the break, the Raptors had the Spurs, the Pacers, the Nets, and the Hawks. I felt confident that Toronto was starting to figure out the basics of the team, you know, and I looked to take the money line on the Spurs and the Nets. Well, the Raptors got dominated by the Spurs, and the fan base got angry at Scottie, but they did take down the Nets, so we did get one W. This week, though, the Raptors have the Pacers, the Mavericks, and the Warriors. I think they can finally do it and get the pizza party, but what the sad irony is they're going to have to take down Siakam to do it. So I think they can pull off a victory against the Pacers, but will sadly fall to a hot Dallas Mavericks and Golden State Warriors. Now, let's get to our 10K 10-week challenge. So I did choose the Pacers game since the Raptors can capitalize on the Pacers' lack of defense. I said to do these legs: RJ 20+ points, Scottie 15+ points, IQ 2+ threes, and other legs to consider or to switch in and out were Jakob 6+ rebounds, Scottie 4+ assists, and Quickly 4+ assists. So sadly, we did not win because IQ only wanted to hit 1 3 in that game, but crazy enough, everything else on this list hit. But we don't have enough weeks to do another 10K 10-week challenge. So I'm just going to give you a same game parlay for the Pacers game. So Scottie has been on a tear since his bounce back from the San Antonio game and also still riding high on that momentum from the All-Star game. So he scored 15 plus in the last 4 games. So for the first leg, I would do a Scottie 15 plus points. And if healthy and ready to play, RJ Barrett can easily take advantage of the Pacers' lack of defense and pile on the points. And in their last outing, he did score 23. So I take him for 20 plus easily. And Yakam has been a beast for the Raptors, and last time grabbing at least 6+ rebounds in his last 9 games with the team. So 6+ rebounds for the big man should be a surefire thing. Now, I know he's not a Raptor, but Halliburton is pretty much guaranteed you 10 assists a night. Last time he played against Toronto, he stacked it on a dish out, 12 assists. So I'd add him to the ticket for 10+ assists. And last but not least, Mr. Pascal Siakam. I know he wants to show out against his former team. He did struggle against the Mavs in his most recent game. So I would put him down for 15+ points because I don't know where he's been going. Sometimes he'll give you 20, sometimes he'll give you 10, and sometimes he'll give you right in the middle. So just to be safe, I would go Siakam 15+ points. And there you have it. That was betting ahead for this week, powered by FanDuel.
All right, now that does it for us. We want to thank anyone who followed along, and we hope you're caught up on all things in Raptors land. If you like this and want more content from the folks at Raptors Republic, check out the description or go to raptorsrepublic.com. Like I mentioned, I wrote a piece on Emmanuel Quickly, the point guard, figuring it out. And there's a lot of other strong contributors on this team, like Cody Wiles, who was with us last week, Louis Sassman, Samson Folk, the usual, but go out and check everything out. And better yet, sign up for a subscription. $6 a month gets you some exclusive content, some real brainiac stuff to really up that basketball knowledge. But I'm your host, Zulfi Sheikh, joined by Kyle Ramnarine. Like always, please like, share, subscribe. We appreciate all the feedback. But that does it for us on the Raptors Republic Network. Next week, we'll be back to talk again. Run it back.